What's good, y'all? It's that time of the year, and we've got bills to pay. So if you enjoy listening to the show, hit the links in the description to support by donating, joining our Patreon, or buying some new merch. If about 10% of you listening right now donate $10 to support the show, we'd have enough to cover an entire year's worth of cost of production. Over the years, I've been very intentional about turning down ads for things that didn't align with our values, so you don't have to listen to us talk about gambling or boner pills or any of that other crap. But that's only possible through the support of you, our listeners. So we've created some new ways for you to support, and again, if you enjoy listening to the show, hit the links in the description to support by donating, joining our Patreon, or buying some of our new merch. And of course, don't forget to tell someone you like their kicks today. You never know how far a compliment will take you, and we all know how good it feels to be on the receiving end of some appreciation. Now let's get into today's show. Welcome to the Exhaust Notes Podcast. What is good, everyone? Welcome to the Exhaust Notes Formula One Podcast. Your new favorite Formula One podcast, your favorite Formula One podcaster's favorite Formula One podcast, hosted by the future Peasants of Monaco. We'll lead with that, but we got to talk about last week's race first. And Todd and I are doing a two-man show. Before we get into all that, what's good, man? How you been?
I didn't do the intro as my rights were revoked. No, I'm glad that the intro is back in safe hands. I'm good. We have our last week's. We're in the middle of another triple header, so
yeah.
We got last week's race, a little spiciness, and then this week's race we were just discussing in the pre-show and how poor we are. So if any of you random philanthropists, private donors want to send us to Monaco,
Exactly. Yes,
we're open to it.
I do have the painting on the wall that's been on my wall for 2 decades, and I still have yet to even attempt to look at going to Monaco. There was a good quote. I forget which broadcaster, which announcer said it this morning when I was watching practice. Said, if you want to feel broken or if you want to feel broken ugly or ugly and broke, if you want to feel ugly and broke, go to Monaco. And I was like, all right, I'm in.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's the difference? I just feel ugly and broke now. I'm here, California. What's the difference?
Yeah.
So last week's race, that was a fun turn one.
Yeah. What's your take on it? I'm kind of been waiting for this.
Wait, what do you mean? Like just that incident or not incident,
just
but that
instant. Yeah.
That was the coolest thing, the coolest like on track action we've had all year. That one little that pass, the size of the cojones on Max, just massive, because it was really an untested situation with that had been pretty low grip all weekend, even with the new softest tire, the C6, I think it was. They just need to go back to the hyper softs, mega softs, ultra soft, whatever it was, the pink, yellow, purple. But that pass was just magical. That was the coolest thing. And that, to me, I don't know if anybody else had this reaction, or I know Trevor in the Discord has probably felt this the entire time, but that pass to me was like, Max is going to win the Drivers' Championship still. Like, he's still, even with the second to fourth fastest car over the time, he's still the fastest driver on average over this season. Like, I know he's not anywhere in the points, and Oscar's got, like 3 wins, Max got a couple.
4 wins for Oscar, right? I think.
Maybe 4. Okay, yeah. But, like, it just showed me that even with the pace advantage that the McLaren has, that the drivers are just missing that little extra 2%, 3%, whatever it was. Nobody else would have pulled that pass in that instance.
Yeah, I agree. And it was so amazing to see. It's like one of those, that's one of those passes that you're going to see on YouTube 20, 30 years from now, just like revisited over and over again. There's only a handful of those level of passes. It does, like, my big question and the thought that I had coming out of that is, like, to your point, like, Max just having the balls to, like, push through that and, like, go for it is still just proof that he has more guts than anybody on the track, right? Like, and when I watched it again and again and then saw Oscar talk about it afterwards, I feel like Oscar just wasn't even, like, aware that it was a possibility somehow. And it was like, how are you not aware? Like, you weren't that far in front of anyone. How like, I can't wrap my head around it. It almost felt like, to your point, I almost question Oscar and his, not ability, because obviously he's talented, but like his just like, I don't even know what you would call it, fortitude, like the like, you know, the like I'm the best mentality that you have to be a you know, consistent winner in Formula One. It took away from how I felt about Oscar after the race, because it was just like, well, obviously you've raced against Max before. You know that he is the only person on the track that will not back down. Everyone else will back down from Max before Max backs down from them. And the only other person in Max's career that has not backed down from him is Lewis. And we know how that went for the 2 or 3 years that they basically ran each other off the road. It just makes me wonder, like who's going to be that next person? Because it's almost like kind of showing the cards for McLaren that Oscar and Lando are both,
they're right there, but they're not all the way there.
Yeah, they're right there, but they're not going to put the nose in before Max. And that's the key to winning, right? It's like, you know, I don't know, like now that I'm saying that, it almost feels like, look, you're going to play against your idols in this sport. Like, if you're good, you're going to race against your idols. But like, you know, you got to be like Kobe and you got to go after Jordan. You got to make Jordan realize that you're the best going forward. And same with LeBron and same with, you know, whomever. Like, it almost feels like with Max, there's still this, like, I don't want to mess up kind of mentality for everybody else. And I don't know who's going to be, like, who, you know, like George has been looking really strong this year, but I don't see him as like the guy that's going to like put it to Max and, you know, take over. It's almost like you have to have the, you know, the younger, like more inexperienced, like maybe it's Kimi Antonelli that will be the guy that dethrones Max for real. Like, you know, like granted, Max may not win the championship for the next, you know, this year or next year, but like he's going to be right there. It doesn't seem like Oscar or Lando are going to be the guys that actually like push him off the throne. You know, like you can beat him to the throne. You can maybe make it to the top step, but he's going to probably knock you off. And they aren't going to be the guys that knock him off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I still see it as, like, I think Oscar's there, the closest. Because he's just ice cold when it comes to, like, exciting things or down times. Like, he's just steady. He doesn't really get too emotional either way. I think it was a serious learning moment for Oscar. Like, it was almost like a light bulb click for him. Because, like, think of it as, like, and this sounds like cheesy or, like, Fast and the Furious-ish, but people like Max, like Alonso, like Lewis, they see the track in a different way. And then this is how people used to talk about Senna, how he would just be able to see the grip out there. And it, as ridiculous as that sounds, but like he would be able to see on like a wet track, like where the grip was before he was there.
Yeah.
And that moment for Max with that pass, just like, I think kind of, maybe I'm hoping, like unlocked something in Oscar's brain. It's like, oh damn, I can do that. Like, do you remember? I think it was in Turkey a couple 2-3 years ago when Alonso went all the way around the outside and made up like 10 spots.
Yeah.
Was it? It might have been Turkey. I can't
remember where it was, but yeah.
That was like crazy. And then like a couple years ago from Silverstone when the infamous "and through goes Hamilton," like that pass, like those are the kind of little small moments that you have to like see the track and see the racing in a different way to be able to set stuff like that up.
Yeah.
And Max has that, Alonso has that, Lewis has that. I think potentially that this could have been like a learning moment for Oscar to be like, oh damn, okay, I need to look at this from a different angle. Because I think he's the closest to, like, to your point just now, like, he's the closest one to being able to push Max off the throne. He's got the car, he's got the pace, obviously. He just needs that, like, extra 2% of being cutthroat.
Yeah, I think too, like, you know, it's also like when I think about it, I kind of back off of my criticism of Oscar because this is literally his third season in Formula One. And it feels like he's been around for a lot longer because he's been relatively successful for those 2 years where so many drivers spend those 2 years with a car that sucks at a team that's not going to be competitive. And, maybe he's on a faster learning curve than some other young drivers. But I feel like the same, that's kind of why I brought up Kimi Antonelli. I feel like it's the same kind of, he's in a better place to be competitive, whether it's Max or Oscar, or Orlando or George, or whoever else ends up being near the front. Because, the other thing I wanted to kind of transition and talk about, because like what you were talking about, the Red Bull is not the fastest car out there. On some tracks, maybe it is. But even looking at I think last week the week that Ferrari had the fastest lap. I think Leclerc had the fastest lap of the race. But even looking at this weekend's practice for Monaco, the cars are so different in dirty air that we've almost made the sport into whoever makes it to the first corner is going to win. And that kind of is the norm for Monaco, but it never used to be that way for every race on the grid or on the schedule. And it seems like this year it's more and more true week after week.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how quickly we got back to this, because if you think back to, what was it, it was supposed to be 2020 and started in 22, I think was the first season with the ground effects cars? Or was that 21?
21, I think.
Right,
yeah.
Okay. So, but at the very tail end of the last era of F1, they had all of the furniture, as we call it, on the outside of the bodywork, making all the downforce and all the spirals of air and whatever. And we had that same thing where it was just whoever got to in front, they were typically gonna win that race. And now we're, even with the ground effects cars, we're right back to that. And they're supposedly changing it again for the regulations next year, where there's going to be some changes and some tightening and things like that. We're just always going to have that. And as we rely more and more on aerodynamic grip and downforce and that sort of efficiency, we're just going to continue to have... Every time they reset the rules, we'll have a little spread of the field, and then it'll all tighten up, and it'll all get real close, and then whoever's out front is going to win. That's just the way the formula is nowadays.
Is there a better way to do that, do you think? Is changing the rules more frequently beneficial for the fans to see better racing? Or is that just going to be problematic because there's not enough time for the back half of the grid? Or, the other part about that now that I'm saying that, is so many of these teams sandbag and cherry pick when they want to actually do work on cars, because they're we got a terrible car now, so we're going to wait until the rule change happens and then we'll work on that. We'll just start that car now, right? Aston Martin this year, we talked about Adrian Newey's whole approach of I'm not trying to develop a car to lose the rest of this season. I'm trying to develop a car to win the next one. It makes me wonder, if there's a better way to do all of these rule changes. Maybe it's breaking things up or
more frequently. That's not a terrible idea. They have two ways they can go about it. Is they can make it a spec series like IndyCar, where everything is very tightly defined, and then you just whoever sets the car up best on that day wins, right? Or do you have to be more regular in changing the formula of Formula One? Yeah, because after you give it a few years and the field tightens up, we end up in this situation. And the more and more that technology advances with CFD, wind tunnel stuff, the engineers are there. Their literal job is to find tweaks and loopholes in the rules to give them a competitive advantage. This whole first third of the season that we've gone through now, the entire field has been, and Red Bull especially, has been trying to basically get McLaren in trouble for skirting the rules with the whole rear tire cooling, all the theories. They're talking about now McLaren might have F ducts through the sides of their car that are venting into the rear brake drums to keep the tires cooler or something crazy. There's some wild speculation. A few races ago, they were putting water in the tires to keep them cooler.
Jesus.
There's all kinds of crazy stuff, but like they either have to, if they want to keep the racing lively, they either have to make it a spec series or make the formula itself change more frequently to always keep some sort of a field spread.
Yeah, I hate the idea of it becoming a spec series because I feel like even if the nuances and the unique approach that comes from like the current rules, whether that's good or bad, I think at least it makes it interesting. You know, the cars always have a little bit of different look and feel. Like that to me is way more entertaining. It's kind of like sports car racing, right? Like, you know, if you define like 80% of it, then like at least you see some outside the box thinking, where like if it's a spec series, then, you know, it kind of just becomes a money game in my opinion. But I don't know. That's also just my opinion.
But like devil's advocate, have you watched like recent road course IndyCar stuff?
Yeah, it's been pretty good.
The racing is so much better, like in general. Like you have like somebody in 12th, like there's a significant chance they can still win that race based on a turn of events, right? You need some serious shit to happen for somebody in 12th to win a F1 race.
Yeah, I mean, I still think there's ways you could change the rules and make it more competitive. I know, like, I sound like a broken record, but we're going into Monaco, smaller cars, man. The cars are so fucking massive and they just cannot fit through those streets. And we see it on other tracks now too, where it's like, oh, well, as soon as you're outside of the actual traction, you know, out of the racing line, you just have no chance of doing anything. And to me, like there's
Imola last week.
Yeah, like Imola last week. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. To me, there's got to be ways that they could still make the racing more competitive throughout that by changing different things that don't quite get it to a spec. Also, like the average fan probably doesn't care if it's a spec race, you know, like if the rules are like hardline specs versus the way they are now where there's a little bit of wiggle, right? Because they just see Formula One and they watch the races. But like I feel like it takes away from like the long-term excitement of cars and the evolution of race cars, in my opinion, because, you know, I'm not a diehard Indy fan or watcher, but like I watch a handful of races every year. But if you put 10 Indy cars in front of me, I probably couldn't tell you what year they came from, with a few exceptions, right? But if you put 10 Formula One cars in front of me, I could probably get pretty close to like what year that car was. And I feel like it's just the little things that evolve over time with the cars that you get to see, versus the only thing changing is the, you know, placement of the sponsors.
It would be so like I completely agree with you. It's harder to like care about the car itself if it's a spec series because they're all the same, right? Quote unquote. I think IndyCar falls down by just having insane sponsorship stuff. Yeah. Like there's no brand identity. McLaren tries its best to have brand identity in IndyCar because it'll run 2 to 3 cars per race.
Yep.
But then they can't get out of their own way and they'll have like the blue and orange car, the black and orange car, the silver car, because it's a special partnership with whatever. So like that sucks. But I agree with you that you don't really have nostalgia for a certain series or a certain year of IndyCar because it is a spec series. But everybody can look back on, you know, the like early 2010s, like Dick knows Formula One cars. And I truly mean Dick knows because go back, they were phallic. Please go back and look up early 2000s Indy cars. But like, you're right, they need to do something to spice up the races. I really like, speaking of, and we're talking about Monaco this week because Monaco is this weekend. I just found this out. I can't believe I missed this. That it's mandatory 2-stop race.
Yeah.
They have to use...
Yeah.
Or they don't have to use all the compounds, but they have to... It's a mandatory 2-stop race.
So that was what I was going to ask you about, because the other thing, there's 3 things that I think about with Formula One that can change the course of a race regardless of how the cars are built. It's obviously forcing pit stops or forcing certain things like that, right? Like controlling the race a little bit more. So two pit stops at Monaco is an interesting attempt. We'll see how it goes. I don't know, you know, it's going to make it more interesting than it has in the past, guaranteed, just because normally you had some flexibility in that. The other thing that you know, that I've mentioned, I think on the show before, is like, I love the idea of going back to like the Japanese touring car era of like adding weight. When you win a race, you get a 10-pound, 20-pound, 50-kilo, whatever penalty.
Ballast.
Yeah, you add ballast to the car so it becomes a little bit heavier. It makes it a little bit, I mean, the engineers can get you around that for the most part, but it could be a cool way to like actually introduce like some leveling of the playing field. And then like obviously the last part is like, I'm kind of always fighting for smaller cars. Like I feel like, you know, I would love to see more passing on these like smaller, narrower tracks, but really I just think that it's, you know, it's more realistic. Even going to see IndyCar at Laguna Seca in the last couple of years, like those cars are massive now too, you know. But those are the kind of
how about
things
this?
that I wonder, like how could you change the racing if you just looked at those three things, or if there are other things you could add in there that would change mid-season, not rule change at the end of the year, but like mid-season throughout the season, you're kind of like pushing the racing to be more competitive.
How about this? I don't know if you've watched like F2 or F3 around Monaco, but it's like the racing's super fun because granted it is a lot slower, but it's also a lot more competitive, and there's crazy passes like going into like turn 2 and 3 in Monaco, which is like kind of unheard of. But how about we make certain races of the year spec, right? So we have Monaco being a spec. We have Imola being, and it doesn't even have to be all the same spec. Maybe they race F2 cars in Monaco. I know this is crazy, but just hear me out. They race some version of an F2 car in Monaco. They race 1998 F1 cars in Imola. Like, make it a spec that they amongst a series of races. It doesn't have to be all. Like, we still want to see F1 cars go around a turn at 170 miles an hour on, like, at Coda, right? Like, we want to see stuff like that. But we also want to see good racing on the traditional tracks that don't necessarily produce good racing. So, like, Silverstone, things like that. Those tracks are built and they still work really well with modern Formula One cars. But on the tracks that don't, especially the heritage tracks like Imola, like Monaco, put them in a certain type of car. It's a challenge for the driver. It's a challenge for the engineers. It's a challenge for all the teams. I know that they're trying to cut costs in Formula One, but if they do it in a spec way, that can be part of the budget that they have X amount for, their 98 F1 car, whatever the best car was in 98. Was that Hakkinen?
Yeah, probably.
In the McLaren?
Yep.
I think so. Anyway, like whatever the best car it was in 98, that's the spec car. Or you have a 2001... hey, look at me. Bonus points for me on that. But like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, how cool would that be if they had certain races instead of these stupid sprint race weekends? Let's have spec race weekends.
And maybe it just acts as a sprint race. Maybe the sprint race is just a different car. So you have like a more, like, sprint races to me are kind of boring. Granted, we've had a couple of good ones over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But maybe that's it, right? You still want to develop like the most modern, innovative technology, but maybe there is a way to do that. That's an interesting idea. I never really thought about that. Like, all these drivers love driving in the old cars because they love seeing what it was like for their favorite drivers. So,
give me that 2008.
Yeah. Well, even beyond that, right? Like, so many of them are like, well, I grew up watching, obviously I think of like Lewis and Senna, but like him racing Senna's McLaren last year or whatever that was that last year, I believe. Just taking it out for laps and the events that they show up to, whether that's like Monterey Historics here, that where drivers will show up and like, I think Zach Brown get in a car last year at Monterey Historics or at IndyCar or something? Like, they all love this stuff to the point where it would be really cool to see them also just be excited about it. But yeah, that's an interesting idea, man. That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, I'm pumped on my own idea. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, you're right. Like, Zach Brown always takes it when he's the boss of McLaren, so of course he's like, I'm gonna take out the MP44 like whenever I want.
Yeah, motivation to become the boss of a race team.
Get on Wheel of Fortune, turn that into a race car, then sell the race car and get into marketing. First we get the khakis, then we get the jobs. Sorry.
All right, so what's your biggest takeaway from last week from Italy? Mine kind of is actually what you were saying about the speed of like places like Coda. It seems like Red Bull is still the car to beat at fast-paced like tracks. Am I off thinking that?
Yeah, when it's like mostly medium to high speed corners, I think. Yeah. Well, they also came out with a new floor, I think 2 weeks ago, and we finally saw the results of it last week. Because like besides Max getting out front, like the Red Bull legit had the best pace.
Yeah.
Like the best race pace. And it wasn't Leclerc that had the fastest lap, it was Verstappen.
Okay.
Who ended up having the fastest lap.
I was thinking of this morning because Leclerc is definitely the fastest in
Monaco.
Yeah, practice so far.
The prodigal son is going to show up and then not show up, if you know what I mean. Last week, though, my takeaway is like you kind of said it, touched on it earlier, which I thought was really funny. That like the whole drama between Newey and Aston Martin saying like, "Hey, help us fix this year's car," and he's like, "No, fuck you. I want to build a good car, so I'm not touching that one." I heard a similar thing come out of Williams. That they're like, this is a sacrifice year for us, that we're really trying to build towards the next regulation. They're legit.
Yeah.
They had 2 cars in the points again. Yeah. They're easily going to take 5th, and if they're not careful, like if other teams aren't careful, a la Ferrari or Mercedes, they could well end up in 4th. They're consistently, I think they've had 2 cars in the points every race this season, which you can't say that about any other team except for McLaren, I want to say.
Yeah, that's interesting. Albon has 14 and Carlos has 11.
Yeah, like Albon was in 5th last week. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like a legit 5th on pace, not like some sort of
Yeah, it's almost like there's no midfield right now. I would say Williams is the midfield right now.
Mm-hmm.
51 points. Haas has 20 in 6th and Ferrari's at 114 in 4th.
Yeah, they're in no man's land for sure.
Yeah, but like they are definitely closer to the leaders than they are with the rest of the pack. The rest of the pack is just like non-existent basically right now. Although it's just practice, but the Racing Bulls in Monaco were fast. Like both Racing Bulls in second practice were faster than both of the Red Bulls.
Wait,
like significantly.
I watched the highlights, but I didn't see the times necessarily. Although Hajir in practice 2 hit the wall twice.
Yeah.
He blew out the rear tire, then he blew out his front tire.
And Oscar hit the wall. First time Oscar smashed the nose and had to replace the front end of his car. So definitely, I mean, it's just a Monaco thing, right? Like I'd be curious if there's statistics out there on how many cars hit the wall, like how many cars are damaged at Monaco. Probably more than any other track because it's so tight and the cars are bigger and bigger. So like watching them go through where Isaac Hajar hit the first time.
Yeah.
On that back left wheel or whatever. Like that to me is the craziest chicane in all of motorsports. And like I feel like it's just a constant death of cars through that chicane. Like statistically, it has to be one of the like worst.
It's got to be the most awkward corner in Formula One.
Yeah, or most expensive corner in Formula One because it's like it's not like he's that far off. You know, like he could be off like a matter of millimeters, centimeters, and it completely is going to ruin the car because it's literally just a giant metal wall that you're hitting basically.
Yeah.
That you're trying to cut the corner on. That the car is so wide and long that you can't actually make that corner without bouncing through. Like I forget, somebody was talking about it in one of the things I was watching this morning. Like they actually plan for the car to bounce over that curb and plant before going back to the right and back to the left again. Right? And that's an insane way to think about it when like the margin for error is so tiny. Like it's so small. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Speaking of the margin of error, they've done this at several tracks, like street circuit tracks in the last few years, but they have that like Amazon Web Services measurement. Like the close to the wall highlight or whatever, and they always say it's like 4 centimeters or whatever. But they changed the corner this year, which I thought was super weird. So they used to do it, the one coming out of that second little chicane in the swimming pool area. Remember where Charles Leclerc like famously hit the corner and then crashed, even though he was like on pole or whatever. That used to be where they measured the like close to the wall, because the cars would come around that corner and be like just like literally millimeters from the wall. They changed it to after the casino coming into the tunnel, or maybe they're doing both, but I noticed that specifically that they changed it this weekend, and I was like, that's such an awkward camera angle. Like, granted, they get close to the wall there, but they also aren't going as fast, so it doesn't look as cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. Weird F1 TV critique, but
well, I was gonna bring up F1 TV anyway, because I was watching, practice, and there were so many moments. There was actually a couple of moments where Jensen Button was talking about how, well, they were trying to show us, Fernando Alonso there, but we're still seeing the track, and there's nobody on the track right now, right there. But that's where Alonso was, like the camera shots were just so far off on practice, and like, granted, it's practice; they don't have to be as precise necessarily. But there was actually one shot, and I'm I am all for the creative approach to like filming, like making YouTube videos. It's just like I want to try to do interesting things and have some fun with it. There was one shot where they're shooting through the barrier because there's a gap in the barrier, right? Like it's like a good, like maybe like a 6-inch, 12-inch gap in between the big metal, barrier like pieces or whatever. And like they cut to it and you like couldn't see anything. Like, I get you were trying to, and you had the focus pulled like through that little like glimpse or whatever that you're shooting through. But when they cut to it, there was not a car there. So it just seemed all awkward. And then they cut away from it really quickly. But it was like, it made me think of all the conversations we have about just like the terrible coverage of it. And it also makes me wonder, like a place like Monaco, there's so many interesting places to see, like the spectacle of it is more than just like what celebrities show up and who has the biggest yacht. It's really like the visuals of seeing cars going through the streets, the hairpin coming through the tunnel, the swimming pool, like all of those places are incredible visual, like aspirational, inspirational, like things that you look at watching this race. You just look at it and think, wow, that is insane that they're racing there. Like, even though I've watched this race probably 30 or 40 times, and that's not including all the old races I've gone back and watched over the years, every time I see it, it's just like, it's fucking nuts that they race on these streets and they shut down this whole city for this race. I absolutely love it, and I want more street races, but it also is one of those things where like you kind of lean too heavy into it when you're trying to capture all these cool things. You almost just need to have like for Monaco specifically, I just feel like don't even have cameramen. Just let it all run through like a series of, action cams that you can just flip through and just put it all up there on the screen so you can just see every single thing happening. Because there's just always something going on too, right? Like to your point, like touching the wall in one corner, like Hajar, obviously hit the wall a couple times, but almost every driver was brushing the wall. Max hit the wall a couple of times in practice. And then to me, that's like, you want to see that, but also like, do you, but did he kind of like,
no, but that's part of the charm of the street circuit though. That's like the one thing you can't take away from Monaco. Like, you can have the bloated cars, whatever, but like they have to show how freaking close and precise they get to the wall. Otherwise, the race would be just like, it's okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I also think that the worst part about Monaco is qualifying. Like, I almost think they need to redo qualifying for Monaco because everybody gets in the way of everyone. Like, there's not a single clean lap where.
Did you see practice today?
Yeah, it was insane.
So much dangerous
so many cars
stuff
backed up. There's cars flying around corners with other cars sitting in, not sitting, but like going very slowly. It's just like, it just seems dangerous. Yeah.
It's so funny, like, because more on that point. I watched a bit of practice, like I said, and like Max was freaking out on somebody for being in the way around the swimming pool section where you're going pretty quick.
Yeah.
And he was like, that's so dangerous, that's so dangerous. And then he did the exact same thing to Esteban Ocon. And even me, like, I was just like, as like a hater, I was just like, it's all right, Esteban. Like,
yeah,
you're okay.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like, they're all complaining about each other the whole time, but it's not like they have any place to go. There's not like,
what are you gonna do? Drive through the wall? Through the barrier?
Exactly. Yeah, let me just pull off the track and let you race by yourself for a while. Like, it's just it's crazy to
Monaco one-shot qualifying.
Now
one-shot qualifying.
That's an interesting idea. So, like, I was actually talking to somebody about this like a couple years ago. I think it would be really interesting to do like a 2-lap qualifying. You literally have one warm-up lap, car gets up to temperature, the tires are, up to temperature, and then your second lap is your qualifying lap. Especially in a place like this where everybody's impeding somebody else, like if you have whatever practice is an hour long, but like if you spend 35 in the pits because people are hitting the wall and the crew's out there picking up pieces for 10 minutes each time, it takes away from the ability for all these drivers to really get in the zone, I guess. I don't know, like there's got like again, this goes back to like making it more competitive too. Like it also would be really interesting to see how, like this morning Liam Lawson was flying, and like there were a couple of moments where I thought, okay, like yeah, he's like in the same thing as with Max, where he's like narrowly missing people because he's flying. But had we just had that one had we had a different format, maybe Liam Lawson is near the top of the grid for qualifying. I don't know. Like, it's just an interesting idea, trying to think of how they can make it more competitive. But again, I'm just a peasant here watching from home and dreaming of being in Monaco one day to see it.
I will say, going back to the TV thing, like if you have a chance or if you've never done it, and this is more speaking to the audience here, like go look at a full onboard qualifying lap or just a full circuit, a full tour of the circuit, because the way that they make things look on TV is actually very different than how, or not very different, but very different than how the track looks to the drivers. Certain parts of the lap feel like the corners go one way when in reality it's a totally different way. So,
yep.
Look up. It's a super interesting track.
It is, and like I mean, I'm sure you went down the rabbit hole with the Senna thing, the anniversary of Senna's God lap or whatever a couple years ago, right? That's a good one to watch where you're just like, what the fuck? Like how on earth did anybody ever do this in this car? The other thing I was going to say is there's all sorts of interesting, I guess, like unwritten rules around Monaco in regards to the way the drivers act. And Jenson Button talked about it a little bit this morning, where when he was racing, which is, late 90s, early 2000s, basically one of the rules that they went by is like never slow down in the tunnel. Like you're always going fast in the tunnel to get out of the tunnel, basically. And there's a couple of clips where people were like getting out of the way in the tunnel, and when you're coming around those corners and you're not really seeing that car is there, you could see how dangerous it would be to like be on a hot lap while somebody else is just like trying to get out of the way. But it's also like the change of being in the sun versus being in the shadow of the tunnel. So like you have that little, like, your eyes have to adjust no matter if you're a Formula One driver or a regular human being, you still have to like go from light to dark, changes the way you see things. And he talked a little bit about it, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if there are other unwritten rules specifically at Monaco, but at other tracks that we don't know about that the drivers like think of about that track. Cause I bet you there's a ton of them.
I'm sure there's a bunch for every track, because that's the reason they have those driver meetings, and the drivers literally debate like what to do, what not to do, what's working based on the current regs and the current cars and whatever. But they all sit there and argue about stuff, about things exactly like that, like the Monaco tunnel. And I can tell you, even from like playing the F1 game, like going through that tunnel in the F1 game, like the adjustment, even on a video game, going from light to dark to light real quick is crazy, even for a video game. So I can't even imagine what it is in real life. Another thing, look up F2 near miss Monaco tunnel when you can. Last year was literally millimeters away from having an insane crash in the tunnel last year. It just shows the driver reaction times are like, all of the drivers have like godlike reaction times because it was so damn close. But
so I saw a stat this morning too. Who has the most wins at Monaco team wise?
Oh God, that's a good question. For some reason, I'm thinking it's not Ferrari. I'm going to guess and say Williams.
McLaren, 15 wins.
Really?
Yeah.
Who's next?
Let me find out.
Is it Ferrari? I mean, like, mathematically, they have the best chance of having the most wins. So
Senna is the driver with the most. He has 6. Hill, Schumacher, 5. Prost with 4. Teams, Ferrari is 11. So McLaren has 15, Ferrari has 11, Mercedes has 8.
Damn.
Lotus and Red Bull both have 7. Remember when Lotus raced? That was good times. With the black and gold.
The John Player special?
Yep. Yeah. The crazy part is McLaren has 15, and they're all from 84 to 2008.
Wow.
84, 85, 86, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 98, 2000, 2002, 2005, 2007, 2008. Because, like, if you look at Ferrari has wins in, like, 1952, 2017, 2024. Mercedes' first wins there were 35, 36, and 37. And then they didn't win until 2013.
Yeah, the beginning of the turbo hybrid. Well, they didn't compete in Formula One for 60 years or something. That's really interesting. I would not have guessed McLaren there, but I guess that makes sense with Prost and Senna because they were like
they just dominated through that.
Lauda and then Prost and then Senna.
Yeah, because Lauda has 2. Wait, no, actually, Lauda didn't win. Lauda won in 75 and 76, but he was not with McLaren at that time.
Interesting.
Yeah, so 84.
Is that Prost?
Yeah, Prost. Senna had the fastest lap. He's finished second. Yeah, they basically, from like 84 to probably, 93? 94. For like 10 years, those two just were like the guys to watch at this race. Which is interesting because like we had that for a little bit, I guess, with like Lewis and Max. But like Lewis won. Lewis probably has 3? Yeah, Lewis has 3. So 2008, 2016, 2019. Max's 2 wins are 21 and 23. That's crazy.
That's nuts when you think about it, that there's so few wins for both drivers and teams, and then you have other tracks where somebody like Lewis or Max has won 4 or 5 years in a row.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know I'm the the Monaco fan of our little podcast here, but I do feel like even though the racing on track is not as enjoyable in terms of like passing and like there's a lack of like excitement on track, let's say, but Monaco is probably the most unpredictable of all the racetracks, consistently unpredictable, because you almost never know what's going to throw somebody out. Max could have the fastest car coming out of last weekend, but the car is not going to be fast in Monaco, right? Assuming the car is not going to be as fast in Monaco. But pit stops, all the wrecks, all the things that happen in Monaco that make the race like unpredictable do make it to where you have different winners and different teams on the podium more often than not. Yeah,
no, you're right. There's been some epic races in Monaco. I think back to, selfishly, Danny Rick losing it out in 2017, and then 2018 getting redemption, even though he didn't have like 2 gears or something. But yeah, there's always something good. Not good, I shouldn't say. There's always something wild happening in Monaco. Checo's crash when Schumacher tore his car in half. Not the good Schumacher. Like, all that crazy stuff. So there's always something good happening.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
But you know what? We'll probably never get to see it because we're peasants. And that is a good way to wrap up.
It is a good way to wrap up. I mean, we are open to not being peasants. So if you want to fund our trip to Monaco for next season, let us know. We'll have some sort of way to contact us. You can find us on other social platforms in the description of the podcast. So
find me on OnlyFans.
We need Rowett for his witty, inappropriate OnlyFans names. But if you haven't left us a review, I would really appreciate leaving us a review. That's my final request for this week. Thanks for rocking with us. We appreciate y'all. We'll catch you in the next episode. Peace.